All right, I recently bought a bandsaw off a guy that I know, and I'm just haven't really used it yet, but I'm just noticing it does need some setup. The blade is very unsquare, and somebody's already adjusted these to their maximum, and the blade is still too far that way. So I just wanted to show you guys how to actually adjust these things. So you have this carrier for the blade to go in between these roller bearings, and you've got these bolts that hold the bearings in. They go in with C-clips, and what the deal is with these is they are, hang on a sec here, turn some light on. So what the deal is with these bolts is they are actually bent on purpose so that you can turn them. Now if you watch the gap in between those, when you turn it, it pulls the bearing away from the other bearing. So the problem with this thing is that the way that it's set up is that these are cranked all the way over as far as they can go, but the bearings are very loose against the blade. But what's happened is it's not actually turning the blade. Like you can see, there's a gap. I can actually move the blade. I should not be able to move the blade between those. So it's pretty simple. I set up my dad's that I bought him years ago. And yeah, it's a bit of a learning curve. You got to mess with stuff a little bit, but it's definitely worth it having a properly set up bandsaw. Okay, so what I'm going to do is adjust this stuff so you can see exactly what I'm doing here. So I got the carrier back on to the saw, and I'm just going to turn these bearing shanks till they're aligning the blade correctly. So you're going to need a pretty skinny 12 mil wrench, or whatever size these the bolt heads are in there. So I have this set of jet wrenches, super handy, and I bought them with my crappy toolbox that I've got, and they are nice and slim, which I've never seen like a full set of wrenches that's slim before, like in that I've owned. I always find like one or two oddball ones here and there mismatched, but I got a full set of these in standard and metric, so that was well worth the $100 that I paid for this like $20 toolbox. You know, it came with probably a couple $100 worth of tools. Anyway, let's crank this around and see, and we'll watch this blade and see it's starting to move the blade already. So we want to go to the maximum. So when it starts pulling the blade away from the other bearing, we will go backwards right about there. And then starts pulling away again. So we'll go halfway between that point, right about there. And then I'll turn the other side. I'm going to get the blade tight between the bearings. Maybe if I tighten these bearings down, it'll actually hold. Yeah, see, now I cannot turn the bearing without moving the blade. Same with that one. So that way you know that the blade is nice and snug between those bearings. This bandsaw, the story with this bandsaw is I saw it for sale on Marketplace. I've been looking for one for a while because they're very handy to have. And I find this thing for sale on Marketplace. And I kind of recognize the guy's name. I'm like, oh man, that guy is a friend of mine, my coworker from work. And so I contact him. I'm like, hey, it's Sandy from Napa. I want to buy your bandsaw. Can you hang on to it till I get paid? And he's like, oh yeah, no problem. And so then I'm talking to him after that on the phone, and he's like, oh, by the way, that saw. So like when I showed my coworker friend of mine there the pictures of this saw, he's like, oh, I'm pretty sure that my dad bought that saw years ago. He bought it off a guy who bought it new, used it for one project. My dad bought it, used it for one project, and then sold it to Buddy here, and he used it for one project. And so, and my friend's father passed away just almost a year ago now. And so this is his saw, like, and so the guy that I bought it off of, he talks to me later. He's like, by the way, like, I'll knock $100 off the price because that's what I bought it off so and so's dad for, and I know that he would have sold it to you for that price. So I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. So that's the deal with this bandsaw. So it's kind of like a special thing. It's really cool that that it ended up going to me, because I was we were good family friends with my friend's dad and his mom and their family. My parents have known them since before I was even born, and they're basically the reason why we moved to the area that we moved to in Alberta here, because they live here too. And so yeah, it's just kind of like one of those full circle things, and sort of, you know, keep tools like this in the family, so to say. I'm just running into too many problems with this bolt here, screw, trying to get it out with a screwdriver. So I gotta get a ratchet on there with a Phillips bit. And this is why I freaking hate Phillips screws. They are just the worst. When they're wedged in somewhere, good freaking luck getting them out without stripping them or rounding them out. Oh my goodness, come on. There we go. And yeah, there are tricks. If you get a strike through hammer, a strike through screwdriver, this part goes all the way through the handle, and it's got a metal cap on the end, and you can actually whack those with a hammer as you try to loosen the screw, and it'll come out a lot easier. The impact will kind of break the threads loose usually. So those strike through screwdrivers are super handy. They're kind of hard to find because a lot of people would just abuse the crap out of them and break them and then warranty them, and you know, kind of just a losing financial battle for the companies that make tools like that. So, all right, now let's see. Okay, so I'm going to loosen this other side just a touch so I can move it around. Let's see what we get here. Yeah, that's pushing the blade around. Right there, that position. And so I'm going to hold my finger here maybe, and that position. So right in between, right about there is kind of the push in place where that is tightest, the nut. And now I'll just double check this guy here. Okay, that's loose. Right here. That's loose. So right about there, right in between will be kind of the apex of that curve, I think. Tighten that up. Yeah, like tools like this, you know, people buy them and they use them and they don't, they figure they just don't work very well. And it's because they just needed to be set up when they bought them. You know, like guys will buy this kind of stuff brand new and use it once and they'll be like, what a piece of junk. It doesn't even fit square. But all of this stuff is fully adjustable unless it's absolute junk quality, and then it's not really worth buying in the first place. So now I'll just check the square against the deck. If I'm able to, just drop that in there, that's easy. So yeah, now I have the opposite problem. Now that blade is tilted that way because this guy here is cranked over that way as far as it'll go. So I'm going to loosen that. And let it kind of relax right there. Yeah, that's way better already. Like with the tools that you have available, you can only set it up so perfectly. But you know, this is what I do with every tool that I get. As soon as I get it, before I even really use it, I set it up so it's absolutely perfect. It's like every guitar that I buy, I do the same thing. Before I even play it, I set it up so it plays absolutely perfectly, as best as it possibly can, without going into, you know, weeks of meticulous luthier work on the thing, you know. But because yeah, there's no end to the how extreme you can get setting stuff up. This blade actually looks very square. So usually what you got to do with these things to get them perfect is you actually have to just kind of cut some material and get it perfectly square that way. I can see, I think it's got to move a tiny bit. And the other thing is too, is you want the whole length of this blade to be square. So it's not much good if it's only square in one thin area at the vise, because you have two adjusters for a reason. And the other issue is if you adjust one of these and not the other, it's actually going to pull your blade like this or like that. It's just one of those things. I got a bit of a gap. So it's hard to do with just two hands. Just move this over a bit, snug it up. You don't want to over tighten this stuff because it's all just pretty much aluminum and soft metals like that with threads going into them. And you will strip the threads real quick if you're not absolutely careful doing this. Yeah, I did the same thing with my table saws that I had, my bandsaw for wood. I freaking meticulously set those things up so they were perfect. So they did perfectly square cuts. And then I sold the stupid things. I barely even used them. But part of my thing is that that's just kind of how I am with stuff. I'll get super obsessive about it and get it perfect. And then I won't bother using it because I'll have lost interest in it by then. So, you know, this is why for projects and stuff, for my bike, for example, I have a hard time working on it in evenings. I have to pretty much have a weekend to work on my bike because I get so obsessed with what I'm doing that if I can't do it all in one stretch, it's really frustrating for me. Like, I've had car projects before. I had a 66 Dodge Polara with a 413 in it, and I redid a whole bunch of stuff on that thing. And that stupid car, like, it was so much work. And I was contracting at the time, working for myself. It was summertime. It was kind of slow doing landscaping. And that car project, I pretty much just took time off work so I could just work on that car nonstop till it was done. When I built my enclosed trailer for hauling motorcycles before we moved to Alberta, I did the same thing with that. For me, it's just too frustrating having to, work on something, get a little bit done, put all my stuff away, pack it up, go to work, mess around, spend 8 or 10 hours doing something I when I have my mind on the project, I'm halfway done. It's a heck of a lot easier for me, or it was anyway. Now I have a job, but back when I was self-employed, I would just book jobs around projects if I had to, and it worked out pretty darn good because I was able to just focus on the project, put all my focus into that till it was done, and then put all my focus into the job that I was doing till it was done. And that way, everything got all of my attention. And so that really helped a lot, being able to do that. Now I'm kind of looking from above here. And I want the saw blade to be dragging the whole top to bottom, whole height of the saw blade to be dragging evenly on the level, or on the square. And if I pull it away a hair gap, I want that gap to look perfectly even. Okay, so that looks pretty darn good. I'm going to do the same thing with this one. Kind of just sight it from above. Can't see any gap. Can't see any light between that. I think that's probably pretty freaking square for right now. And then, oh, those are 9/16. That's perfect. Or 14 mil actually. Actually, you know what? I should, before I loosen those, I should just check. It might be square already. Usually people will square that sort of thing up because it's super easy and very obvious what's going on with that. See, another thing is if these bearings are loose, you'll be breaking blades constantly on these things because they'll always be catching at weird angles and yanking the blade around. And that's exactly how you snap bandsaw blades. And this thing, it might not even have enough adjustment to get it perfectly square. Oh yeah, it does have plenty of adjustment that way. That's perfect. Yeah, that's the thing, these cheap tools, they usually have a lot of adjustment on them because the more adjustment they build into them, the more sloppy a fit they can make everything from the factory. And that way they don't need very fine tolerances when they're building this kind of stuff because you are expected to adjust it so that it works perfectly. So I'm just getting that gap out of there. Kind of sighting the square from above and just dropping the blade right beside it and moving the vise, the back edge of the vise, till there's no gap or till the gap is perfectly even. You don't want the square to be pushing against the saw blade. Okay. That's about perfect right there. So now these. And like I say, this kind of thing, usually you have to actually do some cutting with it to just make sure. All right, we'll double check that. And I'll show you, like, once my hands are clear, free, I will show you the gaps and stuff that I'm actually looking for, so you'll be able to see exactly what I'm doing here. So you can see how I got my square. You can see that gap there. Kinda. The square is actually getting pinched a bit. It's really hard to do this with one hand, but the square is off a little bit here. But yeah, that's basically it for that one. And then these ones here, you're pretty much looking at that gap between the blade, and then when you drop it, kind of looking down from the top like this, and you want the drag to be even from the top of the blade to the bottom of the blade. You want it to drag on that square evenly. I'm going to clamp this vise so I can show you, so I don't have to try and hold the vise with, or the square with one hand. There you can kind of see that it's not pushing the blade at all. It's just very subtly dragging the whole thing. And you can even kind of tap the blade, twist it, see which edge contacts first, right? This one looks pretty good. I'd say that that's going to be good enough for now, especially to just kind of test materials on. Now, something else I'm probably going to do with this saw fairly soon, maybe, is I'm going to measure and drill new holes here and here, so I can slide this back edge right up to the blade. You know, I can go over like 5/8 of an inch till it's just touching the blade. And then I'm possibly going to make a custom, just a piece of flat bar here, drill and tap a couple holes in here, and get a couple of countersunk screws, bolts, to go in from this side on here, so I can have a big wide piece of flat bar mounted to this part that goes all the way to the blade. Or I will just loosen this and see how far I can adjust it over. I might have almost enough there. It's mostly the back edge that's really important, because that's where all the drag is against when the blade is running. So, but yeah, that's the adjustment on these metal cutting bandsaws. And see, now these bearings are tight against that blade. I cannot move them, which means that the blade is actually moved by the bearings, and the bearings are determining the angle of the blade, which is exactly what these things are designed to do.